Hello, welcome to the Think and Grow Rich walkthrough. Now, there's going to be several things happening in this video. One, we're going to talk about the introduction of the course as going through the course modules. And two, we're going to go jump right into the introduction of the book Think and Grow Rich. Now, first and foremost, let's talk about the introduction of the course. Now, the first thing I want you to do, I provided you the PDF copy of the book Think and Grow Rich. And I provided that because that way you can start the course right away. Now, what I want you to do is use the PDF copy to get started right away, but eventually go out and buy yourself a hard copy of the book. Okay, because what I want you to do is start developing your own personal development library. Let me give you some tips here. The concept of buying books and selling them back, or buying books and selling them back to a company, I mean, that's really a middle class philosophy. When you look at the wealthiest people, and maybe you're friends with wealthy people, or not, and I mean wealth, I don't mean wealth just money wise, I mean wealth in all aspects of life. They all have huge libraries of personal development. Books, CDs, DVDs, different programs they've purchased over the years. And they don't sell them because you build up your own personal library and you return to them. You pick up Think and Grow Rich again, you reread it. And every time you reread it, you're at a different position in life. So you pick up different things. You pick up different things that you've never seen before. I mean, with that, even studies show if you pick up something that you don't have a lot of knowledge about, you only gather or you only interpret about 10% of new information. So it means if you read this one time, you're only getting about 10% of the ideas in here. The other 90% you're not getting because it's too much for you. That's why when we study, we want to be persistent. We want to keep on studying. It's not about picking a book, reading it one time, speed reading it, and then that's it. You never read it again. It's about being consistent and persistent over a period of time. Does that make sense? Now, I know you can't really answer me, but just think about it. Okay? Now, number two, PDF copy or the book, I want you to read the first chapter before you dive into the modules so you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so you have time to kind of chew on the ideas, then you're listening to me talk about the ideas, because I'm just going through the book and there's a lot of stuff in the book. This is when we go through these types of books, it can be very difficult because there's a lot of stuff in these chapters. And when you're dealing with success, when you're dealing with wealth, when you're dealing with the law of attraction, you can't explain everything in an hour. You can't explain everything in one book because it takes kind of years to kind of really master. And this is what people are not telling you, because this is what companies are not telling you, because they want you to dive onto the whole immediate gratification, get results now. If you do this overnight, money's gonna fall on my head type of thing. That's why you're not getting results, because you're listening to all the people preaching to you about immediate gratification, get it now, and there's no such thing. Okay, now remember, law of attraction. In your life right now, you're attracting the good and attracting the bad. You attracted everything in your life, what you have right now. That's what you have to understand. You attracted it. Because the law of attraction, it doesn't care, it doesn't matter if you're positive or negative. Whatever you think about, you bring about. And it's really the core of who you really are. Makes sense? That's why personal development is key, because we're changing those core. We're changing those core habits. Because you have habits that are good and you have habits that are not too good. Makes sense? We all do. Okay, even myself. So we want to kind of move over where we're creating better and better habits. And they're really a true habit. See, most people say they have great habits, but it's not really a habit. Think about this for a second. A habit is something you do without even thinking about. That's a habit. A habit you do in your sleep. If you sleepwalk, you just go out and you wake up, alarm goes off, you get it, you're still like half asleep, you just walk into the kitchen, getting your water ready or your coffee ready, you're doing it automatically. You're not thinking about it. See, that's a true habit, and that's how we have to get with the concepts in this book. Make sense? So now let's kind of move forward here, because we will dive into a lot of these principles in other courses, and we'll constantly build on these principles. That's why I wanted to start off with an introduction, a couple books in the introduction of these courses that kind of give you a strong foundation. Because this is something that we lack, or a bad habit per se, when I talk about a foundation. Now, in most of these courses, I'm always going to have a whiteboard behind me. I'm old-fashioned, so nothing here is crazy or super scripted where I'm not getting off course. If I have an idea or something just pops up in my mind and I want to write it down or show you something, I want to be able to do that. So most of my videos, most of the courses, if I'm doing the course or somebody else, there's always going to be a whiteboard behind them. That way they can show you some stuff or write some stuff down. Now, with a foundation, kind of the issue nowadays with most of us, the bad habit we got into, and I learned this years and years and years ago when I used to compete professionally in martial arts. Now, when I used to compete professionally in martial arts, I had several mentors and coaches in martial arts that helped train me, and so forth and so forth. One of the things I've learned is, I learned very young. I was a teenager during this time, kind of like middle teens, late teens, and people will come up to me and want to train with me, or want to train in my karate class, or my different mentors and coaches I had in martial arts. Because in my town, they knew who I was, because I trained professionally in the regionals, nationals, Pan Am Games. I was training for the Olympic team at the time. So I was competing at a very high level. But one of the things I learned is when someone would come up to me and say, well, Chad, I wanna train with you. I want to go to your karate class, or go to one of the classes that you train with. And of course, just being young, common sense would be to say, well, how long have you been training? And they would come back, and I'm just using that as an example, but these examples really happen. And the guy comes back and says, oh, I've been training 5 years. And I was like, okay, come out. And I give them the information, and they would come out, train with us. And during the training, just through observation, they, you could really tell they really didn't have 5 years of experience. So then afterwards, you would talk to them and, kind of dig a little bit deeper, and the truth would really come out. The truth is, they said, they had 5 years of experience. Okay, and I write this 5 down here. The truth is that they told me in the beginning they had 5 years of experience, but the real truth, they trained for 6 months. They took a 4.5 years hiatus. Then once that 5-year mark hit, they just kind of grouped the experience that they got 5 years. But they really don't have 5 years of experience. Do you get my drift? So this is really a bad habit that most of us do. I fell in this trap too, especially in business, when you're writing your resumes and you're doctoring up your resume to make it look like you have all this experience. I mean, most of it is very exaggerated. But this is what people want to do. They start off here as a beginner. Okay. Then, of course, you have the novice stages, you have the intermediate stages, and you have the advanced stages. And I'm just giving you an example of martial arts, but this goes with anything you want to accomplish in life. Okay, business, professional, personal goals, business goals, whatnot. This can be applied to anything. The mistake most people want, or a mistake that most people do, is they want to they're really a beginner down here, but they want to just run over here and jump to intermediate. So they get over here, and what do you think happens? Or they can't really do what they say they can do, but also they have a very weak foundation. There is no foundation because they didn't want to go through the beginning, the novice stages, and intermediate stages to really give them a strong foundation to be able to support and handle what they want to achieve. And this I see is a huge bad habit with most people. They doctor up the resume business-wise. They say they have all this experience, but really when you dig deeper with a person, you spend time with a person, and the truth comes out, they have a year of experience, but then 5 years passes, then all of a sudden, well, I got 6 years. But they haven't done anything for 5 years. So it doesn't really add up. So in these courses, you don't see me explain this over and over and over. In these courses, the beginning courses anyway, we're dealing with creating a strong foundation. But there is no such thing as jumping over here to advanced and making it seem like you're advanced. Because this is really what it comes down to. This is really what it boils down to. Is over here, results don't lie. Where are your results? You can't get results if you have a weak foundation or you have no foundation. Just can't do it. No matter how much you debate with me, no matter how much you want to argue, it's always going to come down to where are your results? Because results don't lie. Okay. Now, let's move on. Because this stuff is going to be explained over and over and over and over and over again, and we're going to build with it. Okay, we're going to keep on building stuff with the ideas, the concepts, and give you more later on in different courses. We'll get to more of an advanced concepts, but you have to understand, you really have to apply the beginning concepts. Without application, without applying the beginning concepts, you'll never be advanced. You can talk about it all day long. You can talk philosophy about it all day long. You can philosophize with other people, but without you really applying it to your life, you're not really going to see results. That's me being 100% honest with you and me being real with you. It takes work. It takes work to change yourself. It takes work to be honest with yourself. It just takes work. Okay? So now let's move on to the introduction of Think and Grow Rich. Now, maybe you've read the book before, and that's great. Maybe you haven't, and this is the first time you're going through it, and maybe you never heard of Napoleon Hill before. Now, Napoleon Hill, when he wrote Think and Grow Rich, he wrote it in the early 1900s, and he did about 20 years of research before he wrote this book. And he wrote a couple books before Think and Grow Rich, but Think and Grow Rich is really a spinoff of The Laws of Success by Napoleon Hill. This is a big book. You can really tell it's like 600 pages, something like this. So then he came out with Think and Grow Rich, and Think and Grow Rich is kind of a reduced copy of The Law of Success. He really gets to the point. He doesn't explain in some areas. He doesn't really explain a lot. He doesn't go into a lot of detail. He does use a lot of examples, but in some chapters and some modules, he doesn't go into a lot of detail. He kind of tells you or says something and you're kind of scratching your head. What does he mean by this? It's really in The Law of Success, but not in Think and Grow Rich. Now what happened with Napoleon Hill, now in the beginning of his career, he was a reporter, and he got the opportunity to have an interview with Andrew Carnegie. Now during that time frame, Andrew Carnegie was the richest man, the wealthiest man in the world. And here's this very, very young reporter, the beginning of his career, and he gets this huge interview with Carnegie. And the interview was kind of leading, and why was Carnegie so successful? So Carnegie kind of flipped it on Napoleon Hill and asked him a question. And I'm paraphrasing the question, of course, but asked him, if you really want to know why I'm so successful, then I challenge you that I want you to research all the successful people, the most successful people in the world at that time. And then when you figure it out, you come back to me. And he gave him about 30 seconds to answer. And Napoleon Hill said yes, he accepted the challenge. Now, Andrew Carnegie didn't pay his way, didn't pay for all this stuff. He made it where Napoleon Hill had to support himself and apply the principles that he was learning from Andrew Carnegie, and he was learning through other wealthy people. Now, what Andrew Carnegie did do for Napoleon Hill is he introduced him to the wealthiest people in the world. And they had success in a whole bunch of different areas of life. And so the book is all about the concepts of around 500 people that Andrew Carnegie, well, not Andrew Carnegie, but Napoleon Hill interviewed. Now, back then it was a lot different from it is now. So nowadays when we do research, most of the time we don't know the people. We're just getting on Google and researching, getting on the internet and researching. And there's nothing wrong with that. But back then, early 1900s, I mean, Napoleon Hill knew these people. He's introduced to all the people he interviewed. He had personal conversation with the wealthiest people in the world. So it was a little bit of a difference of how he went about it, how we would go about it nowadays. So that's a little bit of a history with Napoleon Hill and how he kind of got started with Think and Grow Rich, and how he really got involved with this industry, because he was really one of those people who spearheaded the personal development industry. Wasn't the only one, but one of the main influencers with personal development. So let's dive into chapter 1. Okay, chapter 1 is an introduction. It's an introduction of all the chapters of this book. Then how we're going to do it is, I'm not going to read the whole book to you. I'm going to pick out certain points of the book that I feel that's very important. And if I don't mention something that's important to you when you read the chapter, it's really because we're just at one, different levels. Two, what you're going through in your life right now, something really might jump out at you. Okay, every time I read a book or read this book, every time I read a chapter, depending upon what's going on in my life, different things jump out at me. Different things kind of sink in. You know, you read a book and, you know, it might not be the whole chapter. It might just be one sentence that really speaks to you, that really gets to your core. But chew on those. Okay, it's very important. Chew on those concepts. Chew what's kind of really making your heart tick. What's really getting you emotional about it. Okay, that's not a bad thing. Kind of follow it. Because lots of times what we're doing is we need to get better at following our intuition. Okay, we're talking about this later on in the modules, because it's one of the, deeper in the book, we're kind of dive into that. But the introduction starts off this way. It says, truly thoughts are things, and powerful things at that, when they are mixed with definiteness of purpose, persistence, and a burning desire for their translation into riches and other material objects. Okay. Let me point out, like just in that first little paragraph, definiteness of purpose, persistence, and a burning desire. Being definite, knowing what you want. Being persistent to carrying through, no matter if it takes a week, 2 weeks, months, or a year. Are you persistent in achieving what you want in your life? And a burning desire that you really want it. And nothing's going to put out that flame. The introduction starts off, he kind of gives a story. He likes to tell stories. Napoleon Hill. And he tells a story about Edward C. Barnes. And how Barnes really wanted to be a business partner of the great Thomas Edison at his time. So, and he points out one of the chief characteristics of Barnes' desire was that he was definite. He wanted to work with Edison, not for him. He didn't want to work for him as an employee. He wanted to be a partner. He wanted to be a business associate. He wanted to be a partner of Edison, not just an employee. And during that time frame, Again, we're talking about the early 1900s. Barnes was very, very poor. He had no means how to travel to get to Edison, to get to his company. So he traveled by blind baggage, which meant it means that he went from East Orange on a freight train. So during those times, we have to understand a freight train, I highly doubt that he paid for it. It's probably during that time frame he's really kind of illegally hopping on a train to get where he needs to be and getting off. That's pretty much probably what he did. Just, just through experience, reading the same books and all the books, how he got there. And it says that when he got there, when he finally got to Edison, his company, and he was lined up with a whole bunch of other people. And he probably if he wasn't dressed like me, he was poor. He just jumped off a freight train to get there. He probably looked pretty shabby. You know what I mean? He probably didn't look like he was all together. And this is what Edison said about Barnes. He stood there before me looking like an ordinary tramp. Now, one of the things I want to point out here, some of the language in the book, it's Old English, it's during a different time frame. So, if I say something, if a certain word jumps out in the book, don't take offense to it. It's just it's a different era, okay? So he stood there like an ordinary tramp. But there was something in his expression of his face which conveyed the impression that he was determined to get what he had come after. So it wasn't because he came in, he was dressed so nice, he's wearing a $1,000 suit and looked like he showered, he's really kept up. That's not what impressed Edison about him. He was impressed because Edison could tell that he was so determined to achieve what he came after. That's what impressed Edison. And there's what Edison says. I have learned from years of experience with men that when a man really desires a thing so deeply that he is willing to stake his entire future on a single turn of the wheel in order to get it, he is sure to win. Another thing I want to point out too, early 1900s, a lot of women didn't work. So Napoleon Hill really refers to men only in the book. So when I'm talking about men, and I might catch myself every single time, but I mean everybody. I mean men and women, because we're in a different time era again. So let me read this again. This is very important. I have learned from years of experience with men and women that when a man or woman really desires a thing so deeply he is willing to stake his entire future on a single turn of the wheel in order to get it, he or she is sure to win. Now, I want you to think back here. Think back a time in your life that you wanted. Maybe it was when you're a kid. Sometimes our childhood brings really great experience because there's always something you can pull from your childhood. Early teens when you're in school or college, that's something you really wanted so bad. You didn't care how you're going to get it. You don't care what you look like. You wanted it so bad, you just made it happen. When was the last time you had that definiteness of purpose? If you need to pause the video, pause this training, pause it. If you really need to think, and pause it, because it's so important for you to be able to think back and remember a time in your life that you were so definite that you wanted something and you achieved it, you got it. Another thing to point out, with Barnes, okay, he came to be in business with Edison, but it didn't happen overnight. It says months went by, nothing happened. Nothing. But it says, but something important was happening in Barnes' mind. He was constantly intensifying his desire to become the business associate of Edison. One of the main things that is a huge habit nowadays is one, immediate gratification. And every company jumps on this. It's in the media, movies, television shows, commercials, whatnot. It's all on immediate gratification. It's all on I want results now. And this is on any type of product, anything we're talking about, there's always that stem of immediate gratification to it. And when we start something, even something like this, when our mind is, I'll give it a few days, see if anything happens. Nothing happens, and what do? You throw in a towel. You throw in a towel like you always throw in a towel. You quit like you always quit. See, it's not that programs don't work. There's something in you that's not working. There's something in you that you haven't figured out yet. It's like, for example, it's like in health. I've talked to a lot of holistic nutritionists. That's how I first started. You know pieces of my background. I first started as a dietitian because that's what I was into. As a professional athlete, I was into exercise physiology, and nutrition. More at that time frame, more on athletic nutrition. But when we talk about health, over the years, I've talked to a lot of holistic nutritionists, and some holistic nutritionists, just thinks that, okay, some people are just overweight. You talk to nutritionists who are overweight, and their whole concept is, well, some people are just overweight, Chad. But the biggest challenge to me is that person hasn't figured it out. That hasn't figured it out. So why would you go to that person that hasn't figured it out? Something to think about. But going on with Barnes, months went by. It doesn't say how many months. It could have been a couple years, but months went by. I mean, what you want in life, how you want your life to be, what you want to do, maybe it's start a business, maybe it's running a startup company. We all don't want the same things. But do you have that definite desire to hold to it, that persistence to hold to it until you achieve it? We're so conditioned to throw in a towel nowadays. We're so conditioned to stop if it doesn't happen in a few days, in a week. Or we binge watch on a weekend. We think, we're so conditioned. That's why you're not achieving what you want. Just habit. And it's not a very good habit. So months went by. Months. And then it goes on to say, psychologists, and of course it's saying psychologists of that time era, have correctly said that when one is truly ready for a thing, it puts it in appearance. So this is kind of going back to, I erased it, but the foundation. When you're truly ready for it, what that means is personal development. Remember what I said before, with the law of attraction, you're attracting to your life the good and the bad right now. You are exactly where you are because of the law of attraction, of how you think, how you emotionally think, the core of who you really are. It's not until you're really ready for it when you're going to see the manifestation of that thing you're going after. Okay. It says here, Barnes was ready for a business association with Edison. Moreover, he was determined to remain ready until he got that which he was seeking. And Napoleon Hill even says, he did not say to himself, oh well, what's the use? I guess I'll change my mind and try for another sales job. The same thing. In the early 1900s, the same mentality is the same thing today. This is what people tell themselves. They don't see it in a couple of days, a few days, a week. They say, oh well, what's the use? I guess I'll settle for this over here. I guess I'll settle for this job over here. They completely check out. They've lost that definite purpose that Napoleon Hill is talking about. They lost that desire. They lost that persistence. Then it goes on to say, talk about Barnes again. But he did say, I came here to go into business with Edison, and I'll accomplish this to the end if it takes the remainder of my life. And he meant it. Are you that definite of what you want? You're going to just keep on trying and trying and trying. Put all your energy into it until you achieve it, no matter how long it takes. See, that's really the difference. When we look at these huge companies, nowadays, million-dollar companies, billion-dollar companies, we think they started overnight. We think they just came up with this awesome idea and overnight they became a millionaire or a billionaire. But it's not so. They worked lots of times, years to kind of get where they are. But they stayed the course. See, that's the most important thing. They stayed persistent. Whatever definite desire they wanted, they made that desire and they constantly intensified it, just like Barnes did. They constantly thought about it. Maybe it's not a business. Maybe it's a home. Maybe it's somewhere you want to live. Maybe you want to upgrade your lifestyle. You want to move to a better part of town. Always have that thought in your mind, where you want to live, that picture in your mind. Never let a negative thought creep into your mind. This is a little bit of willpower coming in. This is why it's so important to study, 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 and read. Okay, let's move on. The amazing thing here, we're going to wrap up this story. The amazing thing here, it goes on and it says that Barnes achieved what he wanted to achieve, but it came at a different angle. It didn't come to him where he was thinking it came. And that's what lots of times what happens, especially if we're dealing with the law of attraction. It doesn't come the source that we think it's going to come. So we have to be very aware of how it's going to come to us, and it happened exactly like that to Barnes. It came from a different source. During that time, Edison had a new device. During that time, it was called the Edison dictating machine. It was called the Ediphone. And all of Edison's salesmen he had at that time, it says here, were not enthusiastic over the machine. So basically, none of his salesmen were probably selling the machine because they weren't passionate about it. They didn't believe in the machine. So they weren't getting no sales, because if you don't really believe in something or passionate about something, you're probably not going to do very well at it. And it says right here, they did not believe it could be sold without great effort. Barnes, goes right back to Barnes. Barnes saw this opportunity. It had crawled and quietly hidden. And the machine, which interested no one but Barnes and the inventor. Now the inventor was Edison, but Barnes saw this opportunity. It came to him in a different way, but he saw the opportunity and he jumped on it. Barnes knew he could sell the Edison dictating machine. He suggested this to Edison and promptly got his chance. This is the whole relationship when the partnership happened between Edison and Barnes. This was his opportunity right here with selling the Ediphone for Edison. And this is what made the partnership and made Barnes very, very successful and wealthy, if you want to talk in money terms. Then it goes at the end, it goes, Barnes literally thought himself into a partnership with a great Edison. He knew what he wanted, and he was determined to stand by that desire until he realized it. Let me read that one more time. Barnes, it could be you, know what he wanted, and a determination to stand by that desire until he realized it. He didn't stop. He didn't quit. He didn't throw in a towel. He just kept on. Now Napoleon Hill takes us through another example in the introduction. Now this example is called 3 Feet from Gold, and I'm going to whiz through this one. And I think we've all heard the story in some other means, maybe not exactly here, but some other means of stopping 3 feet from gold. Now this one he uses Darby as an example. And Darby, during that time, it was a gold rush. Everybody had gold fever, trying to find, quick riches and find gold. And Darby, bought all the machinery, to dig into the earth and find gold. And he did this, and he mined. And I believe he was in Colorado at the time. And it was Darby and his uncle. And he uses 2 examples of Darby, and we'll get to the second one in a second. But they dug and dug and dug with no hopes of gold. And guess what? They finally decided to quit. So what did Darby and his uncle do? Darby sold his machinery to a junk man for a few $100s. He just thought there's nothing in this for me. Throw in a towel, sold all my equipment, I sold it dirt cheap for a few $100 and went on his way. This is a very important thing. What the junk man did, what most people don't even do today, he searched out a mentor and coach. So he searched out an expert in engineering, and the engineer advised him that the project had failed because the owners, which is talking about Darby again, and his uncle, were not familiar with fault lines. His calculations showed that the vein would be found just 3 feet from where the Darbys had stopped drilling. So this is the whole concept where you have 3 feet from gold. You stopped 3 feet from gold. So Darby and his uncle, they dug and dug and dug, did all the hard labor, and they quit. And they moved on. And all this junk man had to do, he went to an expert. Expert told him through his calculations, if you just dig 3 more feet, and he found the pot of gold during the gold rush. This concept is what we've been talking about all along. Then just in this video, this section right here is persistence, being persistent. See, most of the time when you're around wealthy individuals, when you're around somebody very wealthy, or maybe you study the wealthy, one of the things they're telling you, one of the things you'll find out is most of their biggest success stories, or maybe when the company just took off, was right after a huge defeat. See, Darby and his uncle seemed defeated and they quit. But the riches were right around the corner. Right around the corner. In this example, only 3 feet away. Okay. Now, one of the things I want to point out here, when we're talking about wealth and riches, most of the time when I'm saying the word wealth, we automatically assume I'm talking about money. Okay. Now, when we ask people about what is wealth, when they say money, 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 I know through experience that person, that individual has a lot of personal development to do. Okay. So when we're dealing with wealth, and I'm talking about wealth, and even with Napoleon Hill talking about wealth, really what he's really talking about is all the pieces of the pie. Make sense? All the pieces of the pie in your life. Of course, some of them, of course we're talking about financials. We're talking about money. Okay, that's a piece of the pie. That's a chunk of the pie. But then there's health. There's physical health, emotional health, spiritual health. There's a whole bunch of different pieces of the pie. Okay. One of the mistakes that people do is they're only focused on one area of the pie. They're only focused on maybe the money area. And then they neglect all the other areas. Then they don't understand why things aren't coming to them. They're not getting the results. The money's not coming because they're neglecting all the other areas. Make sense? So when I talk about wealth, I'm talking about everything. Okay, I'm not just talking about money. Of course we're attracted to money. Of course we are. But we have to develop the other areas of our life. Let's move on. I'll leave this here because I'll come back to it. Napoleon Hill gives us another example. We're almost done here with this module. Is the 50-cent lesson in persistence. And this again is with Darby and his uncle. Now this started with mainly his uncle, and during that time period he uses a small African American child. And you know during that time frame, early 1900s, what occurred and what the whole dilemma was during that time frame. So the child came to Darby's uncle to his shop, and she said, my mama needs her 50 cents because Darby's uncle owed her mom 50 cents. So she came asking for the 50 cents. Darby's uncle said, I'll not do it. Now run home, child. The child said, yes, sir. The child replied, but she did not move. She just said, yes, sir, but she stood her ground. What Darby's uncle did, he kind of turned his back and started, working on whatever he was working on. And he happened to turn around, the child's still there. And Darby's uncle said, or he yelled at her at that point, I told you to go home. Now go. I'll take a switch to you. So during that time frame, even with children of, no matter what race you were, if you didn't listen to an adult, you got a spanking, a whipping, they hit you with sticks, switches, whatever. They pull something off the tree and smack you with it. That's just the era that, this is coming from, or this example is coming from. So for a child to know in her mind that what could occur for her not listening to an adult, and she still stood her ground, in this example, takes a lot of guts. The girl replied again, yes, sir. But she did not budge. And it says, the uncle dropped a sack of grain he was about to pour into the mill hopper, picked up a barrel staff, and started toward the child with an expression on his face that indicated trouble. So he picked up a staff, probably resemble like a broom, almost like a broom handle. He's walking toward the child to hit her with it. But the child didn't move. She stood her ground, persistent. So as Darby's uncle was walking to her, she didn't turn around and run. She stood her ground. And it says in here, by this example, when the uncle reached the spot where the child was standing, she, the child, quickly stepped forward, one step, looked up into his eyes, and screamed at the top of her shrill voice, my mama's got to have that 50 cents. The uncle stopped, looked at her for a minute, then slowly laid down the barrel staff on the floor, put his hand in his pocket, took out $50 and gave it to her. Then it says, what's most interesting, after she was gone, the uncle sat down on a box and looked out the window into space for more than 10 minutes. He was pondering with awe over the whipping that he had taken from the child. Because the child didn't physically harm him, but she controlled him mentally, just being persistent in what she really wanted. And she wasn't going to leave until she got exactly what she wanted. So she was at the point in her life, the child, that her mama had to have that 50 cents. Kind of sounds funny, corny a little bit. But have you ever been in a position in your life that you just had to have something? You had to achieve something. You had to do something. Maybe it's a position where you're in that if I don't make any source of money, I'm going to be thrown out on the street. And you'll be surprised with determination and persistence, you can achieve the impossible. You can achieve exactly what you want in your life within all these categories. And then Napoleon Hill said, he goes on at the end of the story, and he's talking about Darby, because Darby's the one kind of telling the story to Napoleon Hill. As we stood there in a musty old mill, Mr. Darby repeated the story of the unusual conquest and finished by asking, "What can you make of it? What strange power did that child use that is so completely with my uncle?" This is the foundation of the course. What strange power? The answer to this question will be found in the principles described in this book. The answer is full and complete. It contains details and instructions sufficient to enable anyone to understand and apply the same force which the little child accidentally stumbled upon. Then Napoleon Hill, this is kind of a lengthy paragraph, but he goes on. He says, "Keep your mind alert, and you will observe exactly what strange power came to the rescue of the child. You will catch a glimpse of this power in the next chapter. Somewhere in this book, you will find an idea that will quicken your receptive powers and place at your command for your own benefit. This same irresistible power. The awareness of this power may come to you in the first chapter, or it may flash into your mind in some different chapter. It may come in the form of a single idea, or it may come in the nature of a plan or a purpose. Again, it may cause you to go back into your past experiences of failure or defeat and bring to the surface some lesson by which you can regain all you have lost through defeat." That's a powerful paragraph that I want you to chew on. I want you to reread several times. Come back to this chapter and highlight this paragraph. And you can see in my book, I have certain sections highlighted. And this isn't because I'm doing this course. This is my personal book over the years that this all highlighted through personally, me going through the book. Napoleon Hill goes back on topic of the principles. Remember, we brought up the principles of the book. The book is divided, all the chapters is 13 principles. Each chapter is one principle that Napoleon Hill talks about. Then he goes on, he says, "The answer called for a description of 13 principles, but remember, as you read, the answer may be seeking to the questions which have caused you to ponder over your strangeness of life, may be found in your own mind through some idea, plan, or purpose, which may spring into your mind as you read. One sound idea is all that one needs to achieve success." Listen to this. One sound idea is all one needs to achieve success. The principles described in this book contain the best and the most practical of all that is known concerning ways and means of creating useful ideas. One of the things that Napoleon Hill I found very, very interesting in reading the book over and over and over, in almost every single chapter, and you notice this as you read the chapters, and sometimes he says it in a paragraph, sometimes he says it in one sentence. When he talks about the 13 principles, what he's talking about is mastering all the principles. So this goes back to the kind of the pie here with wealth. Napoleon Hill's talking about mastering. See, with Think and Grow Rich, Think and Grow Rich is about the 13 principles to achieve success in your life. So these are the 13 principles. But Napoleon Hill continually points out in almost every single chapter that it's about mastering the principles, all the principles. He doesn't talk about mastering one principle, one piece of the pie, or one bite of the pie. He's talking about mastering every single piece of the pie. Okay, and we brought this up before. What do most people want to do? They're trying to go after mastering one thing. They're picking and choosing. Well, I like this, but I don't like this down here. So let's forget about that. I like this over here, but I don't like this over here. That's why they're not achieving success in their life. That's why they're not achieving what they really want in their life. Because they're going out the wrong way. It's about mastery. That's why personal development is so important. Because you have to master these principles. And it's more on mastering yourself. There's a great proverb that says, know thyself. The better you understand yourself, the easier it is. Make sense? Let's go back and let's finish this up. Then he goes on and he says, and I like this quote, and I've heard this a lot. Napoleon Hill says, when riches begin to come, they come so quickly in such great abundance that one wonders where they have been hiding during all those lean years. I would clip this out, write it on a piece of paper, print it out, and post it somewhere where you can see this quote daily. When riches begin to come, they come so quickly in such great abundance that one wonders where they have been hiding during all those lean years. Another quote I like on this page: success comes to those who become success conscious. And what this means to me is becoming success comes to those who become success conscious, because you're always thinking positive. You're always being optimistic. You're always looking at the positive. You're not letting your mind wander into the negative. And this is another great fault that mostly we adults have. Sometimes not kids and sometimes not teenagers. Sometimes not in your late teens or early 20s. But one of the things I see with adults when they get a little bit older, a little bit more experience, it says success comes to those who are success conscious. But I don't see that in most people. I see that this is what I really observe is people are negative. And you might not think you're a negative person. You might think you're positive. But how do you really view stuff? Are you always optimistic, or do you have some type of negative connotation to it? Make sense? Might be, I'm not even talking about extreme negative, but it's just a tiny bit of negativity. A tiny bit of negativity, again, that's what you attract into your life. You're getting exactly what you're thinking. You're getting exactly how you feel. You're getting exactly the core of who you really are. But Napoleon Hill says, success comes to those who are success conscious. What this means is you always fill your mind, and what you're thinking about, the words, the speech that you use, and always talk about success. Always be positive. Now we're human. We're going to kind of deter, we might have a negative thought, but it's how quickly we can get back on course. Make sense? It's not that I'm inhuman. It's not that the wealthiest people on earth are inhuman. They have bad days just like you and I have bad days. They have struggles just like you and I have struggles. They have defeat just like you and I have defeat. But they don't let it stop them. They turn it around, and that's what self-study does. It's what personal development does. For example, one of the gurus, and there's a handful of gurus in personal development that's been around for 30, 40 years. And Anthony Robbins, I've worked with him, and one of the great things that he says, that he has bad days. He has days he's angry, something pisses him off, something bad happens, just like anybody else. But he says the difference, once he catches it, boom, he changes it. He changes his mental state, just like that. He doesn't wander in negativity all day long like most people do, or it lasts days or weeks. I remember myself, I used to be, if I got angry, I was kind of one of those like self-steamers. Like, it took a lot to get me angry. But once I was angry, I stayed angry for a week. But what we have to understand, the only person we're really hurting are ourselves. If I stay angry for a week, I'm not hurting anybody else. I'm hurting myself. That's what we have to understand. How quickly can we turn it around? Now, of course, I still get angry today. Things happen I don't like, but I change it. I can get out of that state very quickly. That's what we need to accomplish. That's how we need to do it. It's not about being a perfect human being. It's about being able to control our mental states. How quickly can we get out of a negative state? That's important. Let's move on. One of the last paragraphs on this page, Napoleon Hill points out, another weakness found in altogether too many people is the habit of measuring everything and everyone by their own impressions and belief. I'll say this one more time. This is kind of deep. Another weakness found in altogether too many people is the habit of measuring everything and everyone by their own impressions and beliefs. Some will read this and will believe that no one can think and grow rich. They cannot think in terms of riches because their own thought habits have been steeped in poverty, want, misery, failure, and defeat. This paragraph right here needs to be highlighted. But this is exactly different examples what we've been talking about. We measure everything. When we look at different people, different individuals, different lifestyles, we measure it by our own understanding, our own weaknesses, which again is steeped in poverty, want, misery, fear, or defeat. Highlight this paragraph and come reread this chapter, so a lot of these concepts will eventually sink in. Then Napoleon Hill, he gives a couple more examples that I won't really bring up. It's not about talking about every single example in every single chapter. Then the biggest quote that he says is, "You are the master of your fate and the captain of your soul, because you are the master of your fate and the captain of your soul." Napoleon Hill says when Henley wrote these prophetic lines, "I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul," he should have informed us that we are the masters of our fate, the captains of our soul, because we have the power to control all our thoughts. It's about thought power. This is where Think and Grow Rich emits from. It's about thinking. It's your mentality. It's your thought life that you can achieve what you want to achieve. That's why the book, Think and Grow Rich, once you really understand these philosophies, these 13 principles Napoleon Hill talks about, it's all about thinking. That's your thought life. That's what you're truly thinking to yourself. Maybe you're saying it out loud, maybe you're just thinking it privately, but no matter if you're saying it out loud or you're thinking it privately, you're still manifesting it into your life, positive or negative. Then he goes on with Henley, and he kind of gets a little bit deeper with the quote that we just said. He said, Henley, he should have told us that the ether, now ether is gas, is air. That's what ether is if you don't know what ether is. It took me a while sometimes, knowing these old terms that they use. He should have told us that ether, air, in which the little earth floats, in which we move and have our being, is a form of energy moving at an inconceivably high rate of vibration, and that the ether is filled with a form of universal power which adapts itself to the nature of our thoughts we hold in our mind and influences us in natural ways to transmute our thoughts into physical equivalent. Goes on again. He should have told us, too, that our brains become magnets with the dominating thoughts which we hold in our minds, and by means with which no man is familiar with, these magnets attract to us the forces, the people, the circumstances of life which harmonize with nature of our dominating thoughts. So now Napoleon Hill is kind of getting a little bit more specific and technical. They're really talking about our thoughts, our brains, everything becomes, he's really kind of digging into, he's not saying it here, but he's really digging into the law of attraction. You know, when we look at science, science has proven that all of us are just forms of energy. So energy is always moving in through us. So that's what thought is. Thought is energy. So if we're an energy vessel, as I put out a thought, whatever that thought is, by universal law, and we'll get to this in other courses, universal law, when I put a thought out, it reciprocates and comes right back to the original point of origination. This is where the whole law of attraction, no matter if my thought is positive or negative, if I put it out there, it's coming right back to me. He should have told us that before we accumulate riches in great abundance, we must magnetize our minds with intense desire for riches, that we must become money conscious until the desire for money drives us to create definite plans to acquiring it. Then he says, for Henley, for being a poet and not a philosopher, Henley contented himself by stating a great truth in poetic form, leaving those who followed him to interpret the philosophical meaning of his lines. Now this is where I want to sum it up, because it just gives an example of a commencement speech that Napoleon Hill gave. And I'm not really going to do a summary of chapter 1 of the information. We talked a lot, but the biggest things that we talked about, let me erase this here. I'll change my mind and I will do a summary. The biggest thing to walk away with is we talked about having what? A definite purpose on what we want to achieve. Okay? Know what you want. Know exactly what you want. A definite purpose, you know exactly what you want. There is no vagueness. The problem when we talk about getting what we want, if we're too vague, be specific. Make sense? For example, a definite purpose, it might just be a car. Okay. And you say, Chad, I just want a nice car. I'm great. And I give you my car. And I pull up and I give you my car and you look at it and you're like, I wanted a nice car. This isn't nice. But it was nice to me. Does that make sense? You got a car. Oh, it was nice to me. Maybe not nice to you, but you say you just want a nice car. You got exactly what you wanted. Make sense? This is what people are doing. They're not definite. They don't have a definite purpose. They don't know exactly, specifically what you want. You need to know specifically what you want. You're not getting what you want because you're too vague. If you want a car, know exactly the type of car you want. Down to the color. For example, I might say, I want a Porsche. Know exactly the type of Porsche you want, the exact color. I want a blood orange Porsche 911S Turbo Cabriolet convertible. Twin turbo. That's specifically what I want. Then you go in and you can change the colors of your interior if you want, whatever. But you know specifically what you want. I'm not just saying, well, I want a Porsche. Then that could mean any Porsche. Then you get specific on the year. Then you start putting that in there. You say, I want a 2016 brand new blood orange Porsche 911S twin turbo Cavalier convertible. Know specifically. See how specific I am? And you achieve that because I'm so specific with it, rather than being vague. So definite purpose. Know exactly what you want. Two, we talked about persistence. And we talked about persistence in a couple different ways. We talked about immediate gratification. Stopping 3 feet from gold. We talked about the 50-cent lesson in persistence. But be persistent. Nowadays, when we talk about persistence, here, people just aren't persistent. They want immediate gratification. They want it now. They're not persistent or consistent enough to achieve what they want. Be persistent. These go hand in hand. Okay. If you're not persistent, well, you're not going to achieve your definite purpose. If you're not persistent, you're not going to achieve your definite purpose. If you do have a definite purpose, but you're not persistent, you're not going to achieve it. Make sense? But these go hand in hand. So you start noticing the 13 principles that Napoleon Hill is talking about. He's talking about mastery. You have to master these two things. One, here, you want to be specific on what you want. And you want to stand behind that desire. Because the longer you stand behind it, the thing that Barnes did when he didn't achieve it right away, he still held it in him. It just intensified. It got stronger. What you wanted got stronger, and that's what you got to do. If you don't achieve it right away, that's fine. If you set a date to achieve something and you didn't achieve it, set a new date, because it will just intensify. But don't quit. Stay persistent. Another thing I'll leave you with, a nugget I'll leave you with, is some of the questions I get over time and over the years is, well, Chad, I set this date to achieve this. I set this date to get this car. I was very specific, but it didn't happen. And the honest answer is, nobody can tell you when you're going to achieve it. Make sense? Because we don't know the incubation period. Okay? There's an incubation period that takes place. See, we can't see a lot of stuff that what's going on behind the scenes. We can't see all the things aligning in our way for us to achieve the lifestyle that we want. We don't know the incubation period. We don't know when it's really going to manifest in our lives. But what we do know, through a law of attraction, by universal law, is if I have a definite purpose, and I'm specific, and I'm persistent, as long as it takes, this will speed up the incubation period, and you and me both, especially you, will achieve success. And I'm talking success in a broad term. You will achieve whatever you want to achieve. We all want different things in our life. We all don't want the same things. We all don't want the same lifestyle. Whatever you want, you will achieve. But you have to master these principles. So stay tuned. We'll move on to module 2, and I'll see you in a couple seconds.